Okay, I think everybody's just about there, ready. So we'll get going. Well, good morning. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the latest of our webinars. This one we've called Supporting Your Business to Return to Work. And for this webinar, this is really this morning, this is about health and safety and HR issues. So this is out of our remit as is obvious as accountants. So for this, we've teamed up with Mark Sykes and Richard Broughton. So Mark represents EKS Associates. Mark, do you want to say hello and just introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Yeah, no problem, Steve. Hi, everybody. So I'm Mark Sykes from EKS Associates. We are health, safety, environmental and waste management consultants, and we represent several clients in various different industries, from construction through to manufacturing, aggregate production, maintenance and warehousing, and leisure as well.
Thanks very much, Mark, and good morning to you. Richard represents Bright Trees Consultancy, and he's joined Mark today to help us on this webinar. So good morning, Richard. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Good morning. My name's Richard Broughton. I run Bright Trees Consultancy, and we're a business support consultancy from day-to-day administration to strategic support, focusing mainly on construction companies and also the retail and leisure industry.
Thank you very much. Okay, so let's get started then.
Okay, welcome all. So today we really want to talk to you about, as Steve said, getting you back to work safely and how we do it. So last week we published our return to work support package, which really was aimed at giving you some practical guidance on how to get your workplaces back up and running. It coincided with the government releasing, if you recall, last Monday, the list of 8 different businesses that were permitted to go back to work. So these were construction and other outdoor work, factories, plants and warehouses, labs and research facilities, offices and contract centres, care homes and restaurants offering takeaway and delivery, shops and branches, which, if you like, small stores and convenience stores, and anybody operating vehicles, so in the delivery logistics sector. So the idea was to put out, as I said, this support package and look at really health and safety and a little bit of employment law. So the contents page, the package will be coming out after the webinar, so you can look at it. If we just scroll down the contents page, a bit of background facts about COVID. Hopefully you should all be aware now. We've had it drilled into us in the last few weeks. We should be aware. A little bit about the government guidance, and then really the keys are what our responsibilities is as an employer, what we have to do for wellbeing and engagement for our staff, how we look at sustainable growth, so what do we have to change to make sure that our business continues, and then really at the bottom, the key things for you guys is the workplace check sheet. So a list of questions and answers, yes, no, really, they're going to ask you, is your workplace set up and are you following the government guidance? And then we've also published a policy template, so you can document everything that you're doing based on kind of a template framework. Thank you, Steve. So anybody who's done any training with me or any webinars will know that you can't get away from health and safety legislation update. Hopefully this is all pretty standard stuff to you all, but I just wanted to reiterate where we stand with our legal duties. So on the left, as you can see, health and safety. So we have a legal duty to make sure that our employees come to work, go home safely. We've got a legal duty to make sure that we provide a safe environment. We provide safe systems of work, and the law says other things like equipment and access and egress, but obviously I haven't put it in the slide. And we've got a legal duty under health and safety law to provide information, training and supervision to our staff. Employment law, we tend to forget about the health and safety aspects, but I've kind of picked out the key bits that relate to health and safety in employment law. The fact that if there's any detrimental effect from people's acts or omissions, we become liable. And if people feel that they're in imminent or serious danger, they've got a right to refuse to do the work or take action, their own action, i.e. walk off site, stop the work, do something different. It's interesting because those terms, serious and imminent danger, are picked up in health and safety legislation, so it kind of links the two together. And if we do dismiss staff or we do something incorrect, we could be in for a claim of unfair dismissal. And then binding all that together, obviously we've got our moral obligations. So above health and safety law and employment law, morally, for ethical businesses in society, they've got to ask the question, what do we want to do and how do we want to be seen? Thank you, Steve.
So, Mark, let me ask you, with such comprehensive information published, is it as simple as just following the guidelines?
It'd be nice if it was, but sadly it's not. There is a lot of guidance out there, and I've put a few on the slide for you today as visuals of what's available, and there is more out there. But it's not just a simple case of picking up a document and applying it, because the application is what's important. It's understanding how that relates specifically to your business and what you have to do, and hopefully by the end of today you'll have a bit more insight into that. So as you see from the screen on the left hand side, the government has issued, if you like, 5 steps to working from home. Obviously is the first step. Carrying out a risk assessment, which will come into more detail this morning. Maintaining our 2 metre social distancing rules. If we can't do that, managing the transmission risk. That number 4 is interesting actually, because that appeared in the last updates of the guidance when we were all in full lockdown. That didn't appear. Obviously, they were trying to restrict people's movement. Now we're having to move around. We've got an option there to look at transmission risks. And then the last thing is to reinforce cleaning processes. So what I've put up there is the first picture up on the top is one of the 8 reference guidance documents that came out last week. So that's the one for officers, as you can see. In the middle is something from public health, and there's various different bits and pieces. And on the right is something that's come from HSE. And there's 2 documents came from HSE last week, which were quite interesting. They talk more about the well-being as well as health and safety, so they're worth a read. There's other stuff out there as well. Fleet Transport Association have issued bits and pieces, and I'm sure all your industry associations have as well. What we'll do though is we'll look at number 2 specifically now. So we'll look at this risk assessment. So Steve, you'd like to click on, thank you.
So Mark, as a business owner, do I have a legal requirement to undertake and publish a risk assessment?
So the law as it stands, if you employ more than 5 people, then you've got a legal duty to document your risk assessments. All businesses should be carrying out risk assessments based on all their activities and all their processes. And those risk assessments should be looking at what you do as a business that affects both employees, visitors, staff, contractors and others. So anybody that is illegally on your land, for example, will be classed as another. So in the eyes of the law, we all have a duty, excuse me, to complete these risk assessments. As I say, if you have 5 or more employees, you've got a legal duty to document them. There's no legal duty to post them anywhere unless you're following a management system. But it's interesting, the latest guidance on COVID is asking, well, if you read the text there, it's saying it would be a good idea if you were to publish it on your website if you had more than 50 workers. So it'd be interesting where we go with that. The government has also issued, if you like, the COVID secure poster that you see on the right. So once you've gone through this process of risk assessment and ticking out those 5 key points, you can put up a poster on your notice board to say you've gone through the process. Thank you, Steve.
That's great. Sorry, Mark, I'm sorry to interrupt for 1 second. I've realised I'm guilty of at the start. I didn't mention to everybody who's listening, there is a Q&A section on this webinar. So if there's any questions you've got as Mark's talking, if you want to just get those down in the Q&A, then we will cover those at the end. I'm really sorry, Mark, I should have mentioned that at the start, but that Q&A is open to everybody as you're listening to what Mark's going through now.
Yeah, no, that's fine. No problem at all.
So Mark, what do we need to do if an employee insists on wearing a face mask or gloves?
Wow, this is interesting because last week and the week before, a few of my clients were coming to me asking to buy PPE. And it's interesting because PPE, if any of you have done your risk assessments through your workplace, you realise that PPE is one of the last lines of defence, one of the last controls. And I really wanted to pick up on this today. And in front of me, I've got one of those government guidance that came out last week. I've got the one that we saw the picture of before, which is the office one. And it says in there, workplaces should not encourage the precautionary use of extra PPE to protect against COVID-19 outside clinical settings or when responding to suspected or confirmed cases. So the government guidance is clear. we shouldn't be insisting or even encouraging our employees to be wearing PPE in the workplace outside that clinical setting. And that really ties in with this slide here in terms of the hierarchy of control. So what I wanted to quickly talk about was risk assessments. We should all be familiar in how to complete a risk assessment, how to identify what could cause harm to us, how to decide who is going to be harmed by that risk, what actions to take to mitigate, what controls we must put in place, and then how we communicate that to those people that are affected by it and how we document it. Most companies are pretty au fait with risk assessments these days in terms of a layout with a kind of 5x5 or 6x6 matrix to give you some numerical values of severity times likelihood, and then you can have a risk factor. What I tend to find in a lot of businesses that I go and see is the hierarchy of control isn't applied. So everyone goes, oh, PPE, let's put a face mask on our employees. If we protect us from COVID, let's crack on with our work. That's not what we want to be achieving. We want to be eliminating first, then we want to be reducing, then we want to be isolating, then we want to be controlling, then we can consider PPE. And as I've just said, the government guidance for workplaces is really that shouldn't even be considered. They're advising us not to consider PPE. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, Mark. So you talked about mental champions. So what do you mean by that?
So yeah, mental health champions will come on in a minute. Is basically anybody in your workplace that can spot the signs of mental health issues. So if you have first aiders and mental health first aiders, these are the people that we should be talking to at the moment in terms of making sure our employees are in a good state of mind to come back to work. What I want to do really is go through this list that you see on the screen and kind of talk you through some of the actions that you would expect to see in your risk assessment. And I'll also highlight some controls that are practical controls that you could apply to your workplaces. And I'll be speaking kind of generically, if you like, about all workplaces. So apologies if some of them don't apply to you. But when we look at the bullet points and we think about our risk assessment, we're talking about actions for people who presenting symptoms of COVID. So the first thing you need to do in your policy and your risk assessment is work out what you do if somebody is feeling unwell. And that obviously the guidance is you self-isolate. It's important if you've got home workers that they're also self-isolating. So if somebody's working from home and they come down with the symptoms, you shouldn't be insisting that they're working. They should be self-isolating, which doesn't mean working. So the first thing we should be doing, following government guidance and our risk assessment controls, is making sure you've got home working arrangements in place. So that's the key. So as many people you've got in your office or your workplace that can work from home, that's what you should be doing. And when you think about working from home, we want to make sure they're fit, safe and well to work at home. So we should be making sure that they've got adequate workstations. You know, they're not trying to prop themselves up on an ironing board with a laptop. They've got a desk, they've got minimal distractions. They've done display screen assessments so that their workstation that they've set up at home is not going to give them a sore neck or a bad back. And as a responsible employer, these are the kind of things we should be looking for. We also need to be mindful of anybody that's working from home at the moment that has got homeschooling going on. So really, employers shouldn't be putting an emphasis on those individuals that are trying to homeschool as well. We need to make sure we've got a reasonable balance there. So home working is important. The other thing with home working is we need to keep contact with these people that are at home. So it can be quite isolating for some people. So we don't want to be leaving them and not even considering giving them a call 2 or 3 times a day. You know, and if we're on Zoom calls or team meetings or Skype and there is homeschooling going on in the background, we accept that and let them go on with it. So that's my point on home working. Social distancing, so back into your workplace now. For those people who are in the office or in your workplace, you're going to have some people there. You need to think about social distancing in all aspects of the work. So not just where they're working, but canteens, corridors, staircases, car parks, you know, your muster point for your fire. This social distancing 2-meter rule needs to apply to all. And if you remember when we looked earlier, we saw that if you like, the stance is social distancing. If that can't work, then you put measures in place. So you should always start with, okay, can we do social distancing in all places? You might look at workstations and segregating people more than 2 meters, putting people back to back or side to side rather than facing each other. If you have got to have people facing each other, then you might look to put screens up or adjust the shift so that you've got some people in the morning at that workstation and some people in an evening at that workstation, that kind of thing. You would also be staggering staggering your breaks in your canteen so that not everybody comes into the canteen at once. If you've got a canteen facility that requires people to sit down and there isn't the distance, you might want to segregate some of the tables and chairs if possible. Again, remember, it's all if it's possible. If it's not possible, we'll put controls in place. Hygiene standards is important. One of the 5 key messages of government is to increase your hygiene standards. So I'd be expecting cleaning regimes to increase. It's a practical way to do it would be to have people responsible for their own workstation. So you wouldn't have people swapping from one PC to another, and they'd be responsible for keeping their area clean. You'd have your communal areas clean more regularly, your toilets, your welfare, your visitors areas. And these cleaning regimes need to think about these high touch areas that we've heard talk about. So door handles, toilet system handles, kettles, fridge handles, printers is a good one. So printers in offices, things like that. So your high touch areas, I'd be expecting a higher regime of cleaning. And we talked about risk assessments for COVID, which is why we're here, but also all your other risk assessments and safe systems of work that you have. Do any of those need to be updated with these new guidance that we're putting in? You know, if we've increased social distancing, does that have a knock-on effect on some of our other risk assessments? So really, you need to be looking at it as a whole rather than just an individual assessment. Canteen and welfare we've kind of touched on. I was speaking to a client a couple of weeks ago and we were talking about individuals making their own cups of tea. Obviously, everybody likes to make everyone else a cup of tea. Maybe that's not the way forward now. Reduce that risk of contamination. Visitors, if possible, you want to limit visitors coming to your workplace. If it's not possible, then you need to think about how you marshal them in and out of sight. You know, do they go to designated areas? Are they restricted from moving around the site? In all these kind of high-risk areas, you want sanitation. So you want hand gels, towels, waste bins, the ability for people to come onto site and use some sanitizing gel when they arrive. Next one, commuting and traveling. That's important. So you need to think about how people are getting to and from work. Are they car sharing? Are they using public transport? Is there an opportunity to get them on the bike? Is there opportunities for people to walk? That's something we can think about. Communication, I talked about it earlier in the slide when I talked about home working, but we need to think about communication for everybody. So employees and visitors and contractors and anybody coming into the workplace, we need to be telling them about what we're doing and why we're doing it. You know, there's nothing more annoying, as I'm sure we all know, when you turn up to a business and you don't know where you've got to be or where you have to go and who you need to speak to. It's more important than ever to make it clear. So clear signage, employees that know what's happening and how to greet people and where to send them. We touched on wellbeing and mental health at the start, but this is important and we need to make sure that we're aware. If we've got things like employee assistance programs, now is the time to be promoting them. Obviously things like Samaritans exist, so if we've got employees that are struggling, we need to give them that avenue to be able to speak to somebody if it's not ourselves. The biggest thing that you're going to come up against in all of this is culture and behaviour. And it really needs to be driven from the top. So the directors and managing directors of your companies should be the people that are driving all the rules and all the controls that we're putting in place. We tend to say in safety, it takes at least 21 times for somebody to take something on board as natural. So you're going to have to reiterate. You know, we've all done it. We've all been out in the supermarkets and it's difficult to keep 2 meters apart, not because you're trying to get any closer, you're just not used to it. It's a cultural thing. Emergency planning is important. We need to remember if we've got people home working, are they our first aiders and are people that would initiate our emergency plans? You know, if we've got half the workforce at home and half in the office, and your first aiders are all at home, you're going to have a problem. So you need to be looking at that and making sure that your emergency planning can still be run properly. And if not, you're going to have to look at boosting that provision some way or the other. PPE we've touched on, so I won't come on that again. And then the last thing really on this slide is monitoring. How do you monitor? So you would check and you would make sure that on a weekly or a daily basis that cleaning regimes are happening, that people they know what they're doing, that kind of thing. Thank you, Steve. Okay, so quite a lot of chat on me on the last slide, but really I just wanted to pick up on some of those things and put them into the hierarchy to make it kind of a visual, if you like. So elimination, obviously work from home. So if you're eliminating contact with people, that's the best thing we can do. Reducing the risk, things like social distancing and cleaning, isolation, things like putting up screens, ensuring back-to-back working, putting up barriers and walkways to keep people apart. That leads on to control with things like one-way system. And I know with some clients we've talked about one-way systems around the office, and one of my clients has got 2 staircases, so they can go up one staircase and back down the other, which works really, really well. Restrictions on canteens, that's another control. PPE, masks and gloves, we're not going to cover that. We've covered that already. And then the last thing is discipline, with a big exclamation mark for culture, because it is really about culture. It's not about disciplining people because they're not doing things right. It's about making sure they understand the reasons why they're doing things. Thank you, Steve. So I just thought I'd put in some pictures because there's a lot of words so far. So these are the kind of things that I found last week online. There's lots of companies out there offering signage, offering PPE, ideas of how to segregate people in workspaces, sanitizing stations. So there's lots of stuff out there. And at Bright Trees and EKS, we've partnered up with companies that can produce us signs and stickers and barriers and things like that. Thank you, Steve. So I just want to come on to additional support. So obviously we've talked this morning about the package, which you will see after the webinar. The check sheet and the example policy in the back should be sufficient for you to start looking at the kind of things you need to be thinking of. But there is support out there. You're not on your own. It is quite daunting. So you can give us a ring and we'll review your risk assessments for you. You can also jump up a level if you want us to go through it and help you. We do one-to-one consultations via video and we can talk you through. Send us a video of your workplace and we can advise. And then the third tier, if you like, is coming to site. So in essence, you're talking kind of a couple of hours, half a day on site, and then half a day for us to write up your risk assessment and put your policies and procedures in place for you. Thank you, Steve. So just to reiterate, key rules, the key rules really, we need to follow those key rules. Work on home as a priority, carry out our risk assessments, maintain our 2 metre distance. Where we can't keep those 2 metre distance, manage the risk. So do our proper risk assessment, make sure that we've considered all the other areas in the hierarchy first. And then last thing is reinforce our cleaning regimes. Thank you.
Okay, Mark, that's look, that was brilliant. That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much. There's so much information there in a really short period of time, and I think it's worth just myself mentioning just before we do start on the questions. Obviously, last week you'll know you were helping us with our risk assessment and Inspire, and you've really been able to set us on the right track and make sure that we've got the right processes in place. You know, I when we sat down and we started talking, I thought we were going to be talking about face masks and PPE, and straight away you turned everything on its head and said, well, actually, it works something different from that. So, yeah, you've been able to help us, and obviously this is why now myself and Inspire wanted to push this out to our own clients as well, because at this time we've been able to help our clients in many ways so far, but at this time now, as people look to going back to work, this really is invaluable information. So thank you very much. That's been excellent. We do have some questions. I hope you're ready, and I know I think Richard might be joining you in to maybe help you answer these. So if we turn our cameras back on, lads. Okay, I'll fire in. So the first question, really good one, this one. How far does our remit as business owners run? We have a shop next to a major retailer whose queuing systems go past our door. Ventilation guidelines suggest that our front door is open, yet there is a constant stream of people past our door. At least one of our team has expressed concern at this. Should anyone outside our door in the queue cough, sneeze, smoke, etc.?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Roger. I'll just come back to you on that one. It's a very good question. You've got those duties that are covered at the start, so health and safety and moral duties. So I would be speaking to the business owner next door, and they need to be rerouting their queue so that it's not going directly across the front of your door, whether it can be the other side of a pavement, or they can take out some car parking spaces and route it that way. Obviously, it depends on the individual. Your employees are obviously concerned, and you should do everything you can to try and mitigate that risk. Ventilation is good. I didn't cover it in the presentation, but yeah, we've been advised to open windows and let fresh air through, so you don't want people coming past where possible. Hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Mark. So Jack asks, does any of this extend to the employees who will be continuing to work from home? What are the employers' health and safety responsibility towards them?
Yeah, you've got health and safety responsibilities for those people working at home, Jack. The main thing is to make sure they're safe. So you wouldn't obviously replicate everything from your workplace for them at home, but the key things are, if they're sat at home working on a computer, we need to make sure that their workstations, their desk, their chair, their monitors, their keyboard are all set up correctly for them, so that they're not going to get back strains or neck strains. They should be able to access systems like your online systems or your server. You know, we need to think about the well-being of those people. If you're asking them to do work and they can't get on the server because their Wi-Fi is not sufficient or there's no access, it's going to be stressful for them. So really the main health and safety duty is making sure that they're safe, and that's where your display screen assessments would come in, and then also obviously making sure that their well-being, they've got access to what they need and they're not getting upset or stressed out by what you're trying to get them to do.
I think also, Mark, just on the topic of well-being, we've all been at home for a long period of time now, so going back into the workplace is going to be very difficult for a lot of people. So we would strongly recommend good communication, baby steps, incremental steps, and please share with your employees what you're doing, what you're thinking. And they may even have the solution, but this has to be done in a holistic approach.
Yeah, okay. Exactly.
Excellent. So what are our obligations for employees travelling to work?
So we've got limited obligations, but of course they are our people coming to work for us. So we do need to be asking questions of how they're getting to work. Are they happy with the mode of communication? I know some clients at the moment are looking to purchase bikes to get people to work. That might throw up other risks, but it's a good idea to keep people off public transport. So we should certainly ask the question, and if we've got any concerns, then we can deal with it, and me and Richard can advise on case by case on how we would deal with that.
I think also as well, this is where flexibility needs to come in. So having everyone starting at the same time, commuting on bikes, is going to be a high risk itself. So staggered the start and finishing times. We actually have one customer who's a construction company. They have a factory that's doing 3 shifts, and they've actually staggered the shifts. So they've lost 3 working hours during their day to have the shifts coming on after the other shift has left. Typically you would have a handover, but they've eliminated the handover to control the risk.
Yeah, wow. I mean, there'll be an inherent cost in that as well, won't there? So it just underlines the levels we're going to need to go to as part of this, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Last one we've got, I think, at the moment. What should we do about our staff if they're visiting other companies' premises?
Yeah, it's an important question, Steve. We need to be applying our controls when we go elsewhere as well. So we need to be making sure our employees have got the ability to sanitize if they need. They've got hand washing facilities. But also what we should be doing is, if it's a place that they're going regularly, is find out what they're doing. So gather their risk assessment, find out what our employees are going to expect when they get to site. You know, will they have the same levels of control that we're implementing? Will they be able to keep 2 meters apart from people? Will they be able to use welfare facilities and hand washing facilities? So it's a kind of a two-way process, but yeah, it does need to be considered.
So we can go to our clients, to our customers, and say, can we see your risk assessment, please, to make sure our staff are safe when they're with you? Yeah. Okay, that's really good. Yeah. So questions are coming in as we're talking. There is another one. How best do you approach an employee who is frightened to travel on public transport?
That is a very good question, Richard. That's a very good question. And it's difficult. If we take our hierarchy, the first thing we would do is see if we can get them to work from home. So if we can allow them to work from home, then that's obviously the solution. I guess you're asking because that's not possible, in which case we need to look at the issue. So if they've got any concerns about traveling on public transport, can we offer an alternative solution? You know, we're talking at the moment about these kind of work societies, so a small group of people working, and you see this when you're out and about in terms of roads maintenance. You know, teams of people are having to work close together, but they're kept in that team. So it may be that one employee is collected by another employee and brought to work. You know, as long as it's not a different employee every day, then that would be an acceptable way of dealing with that risk. Or, as I say, looking at an alternative way of transport. As Richard said, is there an alternative time of day when it's more quiet? Could they use a different way to get to work?
So it all comes down to communication, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And treating it as individual situations. Okay, as I say, questions are coming in, so we're not done yet. Simon asks, if an employer carries out their own risk assessment, does it need to be reviewed externally?
So if you're confident that you're carrying out your risk assessment and you're following government guidance, then you don't need to. However, if you get a health and safety professional to look at your risk assessments, you're going to be 100% sure that you're covering all your legal duties. If you employ more than 5 people, there is a legal duty under the Management of Health and Safety at Work regulations to have a competent advisor in your business. So if you've got nobody in your business who has got recognised health and safety qualifications, then you absolutely must get your risk assessments checked by somebody.
Good answer. Yeah. Okay. So I think as I look at it, we've worked our way through the questions. There's no more at the moment. So I guess it really just leaves us to sum up there. We are going to follow up this webinar with the document, with the guidance that we've provided. And obviously you've shown us screenshots of that as we've gone through. So they're going to come to you all via email. I guess I'd just like to thank you for your time this morning. It's been full of valuable information. And as I say, this is one of the main things we talked about last week while we were organising this, is about how quick off the market it's been since the government have released this new phase of going back to work. So Mark, Richard, any more comments from you to sum up before we wrap this up?
No, just to say thank you for your time, Steve, and if anybody has any questions afterwards, they can contact yourselves and we can answer them.
Yeah, absolutely ditto. So many thanks, Steve, and it's been good.
Excellent. It's probably just worth noting as well that on the document, it has got your direct information. So of course, if somebody does want to come and do what we've done, which is take on your services to, as we say, externally review the policies that we put in place, all those contact details are on the document. So by all means, come via us or go straight to Mark and Richard. It's up to you. Thanks very much for your time. Thank you as always. And we'll catch up with you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.